Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now today, I'm going to be talking to somebody who's been on the show before. He's a veterinarian. He has looked after animals. He's done all the usual stuff and he's been in the business for a long time. But he also has been training on all sorts of natural remedies for people. And he decided, well, what would happen if I use some of these natural remedies on animals? Because animals, of course, they're quite clever. In fact, in my estimation, they're brighter than people because they know what to go for the natural remedies that they would ordinarily have. Only we feed them such junk food these days that they need help and intervention. Roger Meacock is his name, and he joins me now. Hello, Roger.
Hi, Richard. Good to see you again.
It's good to have you back. It's lovely to have returning guests to the show because sometimes when we do a show, you really only touch the surface, and then you realise there's a hell of a lot more that we can talk about. And your story, particularly, because I know you deal with gadgets and gizmos and things and natural remedies, and you move away from perhaps what many people call traditional, which isn't that traditional, and you think it's only been around 100 odd years, a lot of this petrochemical stuff that applies not only to animals, but also to people.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, we sort of bump into each other every so often at John's when I'm collecting milk or you're there for socializing and a weekend away. So we've sort of bumped into each other a few times, which is always great to see you and Julia, of course, as well. So yeah, no, I started off as a very conventional vet, did went down the sort of usual route, vet school, went into first job, actually just working on farms, and very much thought everything else was woo woo and a load of rubbish and no scientific background and basis at all. And then I moved down to the New Forest and sort of started messing around with magnets, but not to do with animals. I was putting them on vehicles, on engines, and on water pipes, and improving fuel consumption and stopping calcium carbonate crystals from settling out in the pipes and furring up all the heating and boilers and things. So then the company that I was doing that with produced some human magnetherapy products. And I thought, oh, this is a load of rubbish. I don't really want to get involved with this, but so I kept on doing my bit and didn't get involved with the magnetherapy side of things. And then they brought out some dog and some horse products. And then I was a bit of a crossroads, I suppose. I sort of had to make a decision. Do I want to carry on, you know, messing around with the other stuff that I found quite interesting because it was scientific, but it was separate from my normal vet work. So it was sort of a bit of a sort of relief in a way, and something different. So then I thought, well, I know that they work. I know what they work on the vehicles, and I know that they work on the heating systems and water and everything. So, I won't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Let's try them and see. So the practice I was in had its own lab, and Terry was the head of laboratory, and she bred golden retrievers and been to Crufts and all that sort of thing. So I gave her one of the dog magnets and said, here, bung this on your old boy and see what happens. We'll leave it on for a couple of weeks, and then I expect we'll probably forget about it and just move on. And the next day she came up to me and said, oh, how much are those things? And I said, well, they're about 30 quid. Why? And she said, well, I want to buy one. And I said, well, you've only just started. Thinking possibly have happened yet.
Yeah.
And she said, well, actually it has. She said, I put it on him when I got home, like you told me to, and got all the dogs up in the morning for their walk. And I got the impression that he was, less stiff than normal when he got up. And then we went for our walk, and towards the end of the walk, there's this great long hill, and I normally have to wait for him at the top to catch up. He said, no, I didn't have to this morning, so you're not having it back. So, so it's sort of, then you're in that sort of position. Well, okay, wasn't expecting that, but observation is key at the end of the day. Richard Feynman said that. If your observations don't meet the theory, you've got to throw the theory out.
And I
But
suppose because animals can't tell you, can they?
no,
They can't say,
precisely.
"Oh, actually, I've got this ache here."
Yeah,
It's all
precisely,
about observing.
precisely. I mean, I've had people try and argue with me that there is a placebo effect in animals because they do what their owners want. And my
Right.
answer to that was, well, in that case, the owner didn't want the dog to get better when they took it to the conventional vet. Then is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Which you can't have it
Yeah.
both ways. So so that she to cut long story short, she got it, and I decided, well, I've got to go with what I've observed and try it on a few other things. And yeah, we got some great results. And I ended up using the horse boots on downer cows, and we had some very positive effects there. And actually ended up with a story in Farmers Weekly from it. And then from then I sort of was introduced to a Russian device that I use called Scanner, which is an incredible piece of kit, and I think it's probably never been bettered in terms of devices because it treats each individual as an individual and each placement of device as a unique event. And so, um, yeah, I got introduced to that, and I had a bad knee. I ruptured my ACL when I was 17, and had a very unstable knee and got joint pain in it if I tried running on it. And after one treatment, I was able to run on it without any problems.
Wow.
So I got quite interested in it. And there was a doctor who was actually bringing them over. He'd set up the first training course that the Russians did in the UK in 1997. And so I went to that. I was the only vet there. And it's interesting because the training was done in Russian. So so we had a translator there. So it took a whole week because obviously
Gosh,
they
yes.
said what they said in Russian. The translator translated it, and it went backwards and forwards. And as it turned out, it was good that that was the way it was done because some of what they were saying was so different to what I'd learnt in my vet course, although they were training for the device to be used on people because it was developed for treating people. Um, but it was so different from my understanding of the body physiology and the rest of it, that actually having that gap while the next bit of Russian was being spoken just gave your head time to get around the last English translation and
Yes.
get yourself ready for the next one. So so it was fascinating course, and they spoke a little bit of Russian, but obviously not enough to do the whole a bit of English, but not enough to do the whole course in English. So I spoke to one of the Russian doctors in one of the breaks and said, "Look, have you ever used this on animals?" And she said, "No, not really." And I said, "Is there any reason why we can't?" And we're all mammals at the end of the day. Obviously, there are some differences, and
Hope so.
she said, well, some of us anyway, and
Yeah.
and so she said, no, I can't. The principles are going to be the same, and the device works on a biofeedback principle. So there's I can't see any reason why not. So
Mm.
that was good enough for me. So I became the first vet in the world to start using Scanner for treating animals.
Wow. And did you see results rapidly?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was amazing. Because I was still working as a conventional vet and working in farm practice at that time. One of the first cases I treated was a pig. And if you've driven around the country, you've seen all the outdoor pig units where they've got the huts
Yes.
in the field and everything. So what tends to happen is the sows will go in and be out in the huts for some time, and then they may go into inside for farrowing later on. So then a new batch of sows comes out. So what they do is they move the house to a different part of the little paddock that it's in, and they burn the old bed and rebed it. Obviously, the house down in its new situation with new straw. So they'd done this, and it was quite cold. So the sow realized that there was this great, lovely, warm bed outside. And so she went and laid down on it and got,
What you mean? It was still smouldering?
it wasn't, can't have been far off because she got very badly burnt.
Oh, blimey!
And so I was,
Bacon before
well,
ready.
yeah, no, she's, a bit of crackling. And, and so, I was at the farm and they said, oh, last thing, can you have a look at this sow? Because we don't know what to do with her because
Yeah.
she burnt herself on this bed, obviously, and they treated her and they'd given some antibiotics because they were worried about infection in the damaged skin and everything. And when she was on the antibiotics, she picked up and she ate and she was fine. But if they stopped giving the antibiotics, then
Hmm.
she sort of obviously went downhill a little bit, and they'd sort of done this cycle a couple of times and were sort of in a situation going, well, we can't keep giving her antibiotics, but we don't want her to suffer either. What do we do? And so I said, well, I've got this gadget, and I said, well, let's try it and see. I've only just got it. It's theory is good. Let's give it a go. So I treated this sow on over the burnt areas of the skin, and for about 20 minutes, half an hour. Didn't think, said, okay, that's it. Be sort of rubbing this thing over the skin and doing various different things with it. And they said, okay. So not quite sure, but said, okay, you're the vet.
Yeah.
And sort of left. And then a couple of days later, I think it was on the end of a week, and then so the beginning of the next week, I was there again for something else, and I sort of wandered up to their little tea hut where they're all having their break, and one of them goes, "Oh, here comes Bones." I thought, okay,
From
so,
Star Trek.
exactly, and so I said, "Well, how's the sow doing?" And they said, "Well, I think you better come and see." And I thought, well, that's either good or
Yes.
bad.
Can go either
It
way.
could go either way, they were
Yeah.
going to sort of hound me. But I thought, well, being called Bones was possibly a little bit more positive. So anyway, they took me around to see the sow, and the skin had grown back, hair was starting to grow back. They hadn't. She'd been off the antibiotics when I'd seen her, and done the treatment, and she started eating the following morning when they put food out. She went straight to the trough, ate, and never looked back. Never went back on
My.
antibiotics, and ended up going back into the herd and going back into pigs. So that was a result, and
Yeah. And what a boost for you.
well, precisely. And from then on, whenever I went to the farm, it was, oh, here comes Bones, here comes
Here
Bones.
comes
So
Bones.
so it was great. And then I tried it on a few more sort of cows with, I think, tried it on a cow with gangrenous mastitis, and we managed to save her. We lost the quarter, but we managed to save her. So that was a benefit. But it doesn't really lend itself to sort of to the farming situation. A lot of herd health is done as a herd on a sort of a group approach, rather obviously do some individual treatments. But when as a vet, when we're on a farm, we tend not to spend a lot of time
Per
on one
animal.
animal unless it's part of doing a routine fertility visit, or you've got to do a calving or a cesarean or something specifically like that, where it's going to be a long time and costly then,
Yes.
so it didn't really economically fit into that sort of model. So the logical thing to do really was to treat horses and and dogs. And because obviously the Russians had given me the training to treat people, it seemed to make sense to do that too. And it was funny that I went to the States, and went to a ranch to treat some horses, and the owner said, "You're not going anywhere near the horses till you've treated me first." So actually, it was quite good for owners to see the benefits that they felt, and then they could sort of in their mind translate that to their horses, and then do the treatment, and then they were happy that there was something actually going on.
Mm.
So that was so I went into horses and I started treating. I think the first horse I treated was a mare that had tendon injuries on both front legs, um, and although they'd repaired to the point where she was okay, she couldn't go back into work, so she was basically retired in a field, and sort of slipped to the bottom of the pecking order as a result of not being quite so fit as the rest.
Mm.
So I went to see Will, who was sort of owned the yard, because I knew he was into gadgets. I think he was one of the first people in the country to get an Apple computer.
Right.
So I knew he'd be open to the idea of trying some
Yes.
new gadgetry. And so we treated this mare um, a week apart for about 2 or 3 weeks. And she went back into work, went to the top of the pecking order in the field again because she was the senior mare. And yeah, and carried on working for another 5 years without problems. So I had some very positive results very early on, and yeah, so it just sort of made sense then to carry on treating horses and also treating dogs and owners as or other people as they needed it. Um, and that sort of took me all around the country. So I couldn't really do first opinion work because I couldn't guarantee being around if there was an emergency. So I just restricted it to sort of second opinion and referral work. And I also thought doing it that way that other vets would find me less threatening because I wasn't trying to steal their
Right.
clients. I'd
Yeah.
come in, sort out an injury or whatever was going on, and speed it up because the scanner speeds up the healing speed sort of 2 to 3 times the normal speed.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and then hand them back, as it were. So, but unfortunately, other vets didn't see it that way, and
Well, I was going to ask you how. I mean, here you are with this miracle cure, this gadget that Star Trekian technology.
yeah,
How do other have they not sort of jumped on it and gone, crikey, we must have this?
no, no, not at all. No, they've attacked me. They've complained to the Royal College about what I do.
Yeah, don't heal things for
No,
goodness
no, I've been
sake.
accused of, using nothing much more than a TV remote control. And it's like, well, good luck taking your TV remote control and doing what happens
Yeah,
here. It doesn't work like that.
you can't change the animal
No, no,
over.
exactly. Yeah.
It's a horse now. It's a
Fast forward,
pig.
racehorse,
Yes,
keep going, keep going.
faster.
Press another button for jump. It's like be like a video game,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
but if you do manage to get a gadget like that, you could sell that for a fortune
Oh, well,
to race
absolutely,
owners, couldn't you? Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
at the last
I've,
minute.
I've chipped this one.
Yeah.
I could take it
But
to the Grand National.
there you go. But I mean, it's astonishing how stuck in the mud, quite literally, I suppose, these other veterinarians are. Then that they're not open to a new technology which is non-invasive.
I think it's an attitude towards of science generally um, that seems to have emerged, where unless something has been written up and peer reviewed, it can't be scientific, which is clearly ridiculous, and observation counts for nothing.
Hmm.
And the fact
Is
that
the kit prohibitively expensive for a vet to
no,
have it? And no, so there's no reason why they couldn't give it a go and go. Well, actually, we'll just try this as a last resort. And oh, look at that! The Alsatian that's beloved by the family isn't going to die after all. We've managed to restore. I mean, their reputation would be amazing.
well, that was sort of my thought process as well. I thought there's, if somebody they didn't even have to give me a lot of credence. They could say, look, we don't understand what he does. We don't know much about it, but he's a vet. He seems to be getting some good results. Give him a try, see what happens.
Yeah,
And there's two scenarios then, isn't there? One is it works, and then they've actually been a party of that process of
yeah,
getting me in to do it. So they get some credence for helping. Um, And if it doesn't work, well, they haven't endorsed me and forced anything on anybody. And then the owners will go back and go, well, we tried it and it didn't work in this situation. What else have we got to do? And at least, you know, they've tried, as you say, all avenues when you're in that situation where there aren't many avenues around.
Yeah.
And so from that point of view, they haven't lost anything and their reputation hasn't been tarnished. But they don't seem to have that attitude, unfortunately. Um, and yet, they accuse me of being unscientific. And I'm going, well, hang on a minute. When you look at atoms and particles at that fundamental level of physics, everything is vibration and waves. So energy is is what we are, and you can prove it because when we were at school and we had all those science books. If you did chemistry or physics, there was tables of bonds and bond lengths and bond energies and all the rest. So there are conventionally known tables which explain these things. And obviously, if you've got a bond length and it's got a certain energy, then by definition, it must have a certain vibration. And so we are vibration. So to treat with frequency is far more logical than trying to use some sort of physical biochemical. Um, and I think modern medicine generally across the board, whether it's human or animal, we're sort of stuck in this biochemistry paradigm when we need to be looking at biophysics. Um,
Mm.
and once you go into biophysics, it's a very deep rabbit hole that you suddenly get to the point where you understand that light is perhaps even more important than what we eat. Um, so it's a very different way of thinking, and actually hugely grounded in science. And yet I get accused of being unscientific, and therefore bringing the profession into disrepute, which has been the accusation in the past. Um,
But difficult for them though. If I mean, it would be one thing if you treated a horse and it died, or you microwaved it or something, and they said, well, actually, what's happened there? You've just cooked the blooming. I mean, then there would be some justification. But as far as from what you said, you've not gone in and zapped zapped the poor thing
well,
or
precisely.
people.
Yeah, precisely. And I just because I don't treat in the same way doesn't mean that I've rejected and thrown out everything that I learned at university. Obviously, I've got my understanding of physiology and anatomy, and I've got that ability to clinically assess a case. And there
Hmm.
are some times when people will contact me and say, "Oh, can you treat this?" And I'll say, no, this is a surgical situation.
Yes.
There are better I'm not a surgeon. I stopped doing surgery once I left general practice, and there are people who specialize in it, and I'm a great believer of doing the right modality at the right time by the right person. And if you do that, you're going to get the best result. And I know my limitations, and I'm not a surgeon. I don't practice it. I don't want to do surgery. I try and do everything to avoid it. So, but there are some situations where that is the best option. And so that's what I will tell people. So I always very conscious, because I'm working outside the box, not to take on and overpromise things that
Yeah.
unrealistically, because I'm actually putting my own neck on the block if I'm not careful. So if anything, I probably tend to underpromise and overdeliver, but I will, on the whole, there'll be some things I can go, yeah, I know I can help that because I've helped a lot of them in the past. Um, and 99 times out of 100, then that will happen. So it's
Is there an element? I mean, one can't help feeling that there's a slight element of protecting their living because if they're able to keep supplying chemicals, petrochemicals or whatever, medicine, pharmaceuticals to a client, that's a nice little revenue stream, rather than you come in, bing, oh there we are, done, don't need any more, thanks very much.
I mean, there's certainly there is that angle. I don't think it's quite conscious
Right.
in that to that degree. But I think there probably is a sort of background understanding that that is the situation. Although I would argue that there's enough injuries and new things happening that by speeding up
Right.
getting better results on what you're already doing is never going to be a bad policy. So I don't fully understand
I
that
mean, it just
mentality.
seems very strange then, because it's almost like, well, the science is fixed. We're stuck with this 1930s mentality of, actually, this is how we do things, and we've been doing it for 70 years or however long, and we'll improve the medicine side of, or the pharmaceutical side, or the operations, but they're not open to, like, watching Star Trek and thinking, I wonder if there is a mechanism that you can do things. And yet, in other avenues, we're very open to new technology all the time. I mean, look at how people use their telephones with cameras and, all the communication stuff. Whereas before we were there with the old 1970s. Well, I was, you a bit younger than me.
No, no, I remember those, yeah. And yeah.
The candlesticks. You remember the can? I don't know. I'm not that old.
Got-
But yeah, it is fun. But so, how about people? How do ordinary the people that you deal with? Are they more accepting of this new type of technology?
Yeah, up to a point, yes. I mean, I mean, I thought that same as you, sort of being a technology, those who perhaps were open to doing something differently, but perhaps didn't want to trust in acupuncture or homeopathy because they were seen as going back in time,
Right.
even though they're still, very effective. I'm not dissing them at all, but I did admittedly think that having a technology in a box and with a microchip that did things and was working on electrical current would be seen as an advance, and some people I think do see that. There are others who are open to more natural ways of doing things, but who nevertheless still don't like straying from the trusted path of homeopathy and acupuncture and things like that. And some of the things that I do, like the scanner and the bioresonance and the wave genetics as well, they're
The what
sort of
genetics?
wave genetics.
Wave genetics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, that's fun work. We can talk about that. And
And is
they're a
that
bit
is it
more
is
out
it
there, and so people don't necessarily, even though they're perhaps open to doing stuff,
right?
that they sort of see that as maybe a step too far because they haven't heard about it before.
Is it because they can't see anything happening? If you stick, you're doing acupuncture, you can see it. There's something physical happening, or you swallow a pill. There's again but you wave something or you rub something on something where it's a wave or an energy or a vibration. You can't go, we're paying this bloke thousands of pounds to come in here and do this, and he's just waved a magic wand over it. That's not going to, do you think it's because people can't see it that then there's this sort of a leap of faith? They're going, well, is he just a quack?
I think possibly that there is an element of that thought process, although actually, if they, during the treatment, there are things to see, because the way the scanner works is the guy who invented it did a joint degree in medicine and electronics, and he recognized that the body is electric, and that the the skin is almost like a window into deeper pathology. So you get electrical changes in the parameters of the skin as a result of pathology happening deeper in. And so you can use the window to find areas on the body that correspond to that pathology, a bit like reflexology, I suppose, but it's more of a direct projection. And then, so it measures where the skin isn't perhaps quite the right the parameters are. So it puts a signal in to the body to get the body to address that. And the signal it puts in is shaped like a nerve impulse. It's not like a square wave or a sine wave or some of these other electronic gadgets that people do have. That they're not really speaking the same language of the body. So if you take the signal coming out the scanner and put it on an oscilloscope, it actually looks like a nerve impulse, which is why the body recognizes it and responds to it. And so once you've put a signal in and the body responds, it changes the parameters on the skin that the device is measuring. and so that then controls the next signal in, and this happens, hundred thousands of times per second. So you actually end up in a feedback loop where the body is being communicating, having a conversation, if you like, with the device in real time and responding to correct what's going on. And so that's why it's so effective. But the chemicals that process get that they get released naturally by the body, they're called neuropeptides. So they're basically proteins which are produced in parts of the nervous system. But at the same time, you also get other chemicals called endorphins released. So if you've ever seen a horse being twitched, it has that's a result of endorphin release. So it looks like their heads hang and they go droopy and sleepy. And so when I'm doing the treatment and you're in the good spot, you will see the effect of these endorphins being released, which then signals that you're getting all these correct neuropeptides being released at the same time. And so the horses will sometimes start swaying like they're going to fall over because they're almost falling asleep on their feet. And I've had dogs actually literally falling asleep while I've been treating them. So, the owners do notice. And some of them will go, oh, I never thought they would sit still this long, or
Wow.
never thought that
Yeah.
are you sure you haven't got some spiky needle in those things going,
Well,
putting drugs
yeah.
into the in while we're not looking, sort of thing. So there is an effect, but obviously they've got to try it to see
Yes.
it.
I mean, ultimately, what sounds like what's happening is we know that the body, whether it be an animal or a human, wants to heal itself and is
Yes.
desperately trying to heal itself all the time because there's all sorts of problems that we come, whether it's a grazed knee or someone's injected some poison into you, whatever it is, the body's going, oh, I can fix that because that's what I've been born to do, is
Yeah.
to continually do that. So it sounds like your television changer is actually stimulating the body to heal itself.
Absolutely, it is, and that's the body can only ever heal itself. I mean, even if surgery's been done and you fixed a broken bone, all the surgery's doing is putting the two broken bits back together. It's still the body still
It's
has to
right.
bridge the gap. So healing can only ever happen by the body healing itself. So what the scanner is doing, and the reason why the body doesn't always fully heal itself is because from, I suppose, if you go down to sort of base drive for the body, it's eating, drinking, procreation, and being able to run away.
All at
And
the
if you
same time.
oh, yes, well, if you can do it at the same time, you're a better man than me. Um, but that's basically, there's a finite resource of energy to do all those things. And so if the body gets to the point where it can effectively then carry on and do those things, it'll go, well, okay, I fixed the body to be able to do those basic fundamental
Yes.
necessities. I could put more energy into this, but I don't need to. It's not necessarily a useful use because I might have to run away in a minute. So
It's interesting you say that because when you think of the old days and you think, you read old books or whatever, and people always used to like go to the sea and rest for a month or two,
yeah,
wouldn't they? And they'd be told to do very little because the body just did itself. But or and people would spend a whole week in bed or of course the importance of sleep,
yeah,
so that you let the body do. Whereas in this modern day, we're always going for a very quick fix. We want to get something injected or ingested, so that we can go back, and we're ever pushed by work and the need to work to be able to sort of shortcut what the body actually is saying. Look, I just need to go and have a lie down for a few days and check out for a bit. But we don't allow that.
no, I think part of the problem with that is that the sort of pharmaceutical paradigm is very much symptom suppression.
Right.
So it's a question of, if I don't feel the pain, I can carry on, and the fact that the injury hasn't actually healed, it is
Yes.
sort of,
Yes.
you're not consciously aware of it. Whereas pain actually, to a certain degree, has a function in telling the body what it can and can't do. So it's, yeah, no, I think you're right. The sort of that we are looking for that quick fix the whole time. But they're also looking for sort of, as you're saying, getting back to performance, if you like, before we're ready. So what the scanner is doing when it's doing the treatment is it effectively amplifies the pathological signal back to the brain. And so the body goes, oh, blimey, didn't realize it was that bad, governor. I better put a bit of
Yes.
extra energy and healing into this area to get it right. And so that's why everything gets speeded up, and you'll very often get a much better, deeper level of healing. So there'll be less scar tissue, for example, the end result, because the body's been pushed to go faster
Yes.
and deeper in terms of what it's doing. And because the neuropeptides are activating and switching on, switching off genes, you're actually getting the body to heal, for example, a tendon or a muscle or a ligament with the original tissue type, rather than putting scar tissue in as a temporary fix and then going, okay, well, it's fixed now. I don't have to, we can leave that scar tissue there, which the line, the join between scar tissue and the normal tissue is actually another line of weakness. So,
Right. Yes,
so
of
the
course.
least scar tissue you can have in a tissue repair, the less likely it is to recur.
And I mean, I know that from women who have cesareans, they have one and then they maybe have another, and the lovely Julia was forced to have two cesareans, and she says, if I stretch up like this, I feel that I could just split. It's constantly
Yeah.
feeling a weak area, which of course. It's healed up as much as you can see, but as you say, it's still weak. So tell me what this wave stuff is.
Oh,
Then is that,
genetics. Okay,
yeah, wave genetics.
now that's
Is it complicated?
the principle of it is very cool, but obviously it is quite complicated. So the idea is that DNA isn't the sole blueprint for our body, if you like, because nucleotides of DNA, they effectively code for protein, but we're not just blobs of protein. We've got other aspects to us as well. And we're not just a blob either. Some of us less blobby
Luckily,
than others, but
yes.
but
Depends what you eat these days.
so we've got form. So you've got obviously things there, and you've so there's an information, if you like, behind what how a body is put together. It's and so there's again another Russian called Peter Gurayev, who worked on the Russian genome project. And when West was saying, oh, that we've got junk DNA, he was saying, no, there isn't any such thing as junk DNA. This DNA gives context to the other bit. It's like part of the instruction.
Right.
But he also recognized that there was like an information behind the DNA as well, a bit like a QR code. So you've got a QR code and it looks like a series of dots and everything, a bit like our DNA looks like a spirally thing. But there's another level of information behind that. And that as we age, the DNA gets a little bit corrupted with mutations and damage from EMFs or poor diet and lifestyle, whatever else. And so that link back to our original blueprint information gets corrupted a bit like the old um, radios that were not quite
Right.
tuned in correctly, a bit of white
Yes.
noise in there, so you can sort of make out the tune, but you can't quite hear all the
Gets
details.
fuzzy and
Yes,
distorted and all of that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and so what? And there is a whole theory in physics where they talk about a holographic universe where every bit of information has a node on this hologram, and it's all linked as holograms are. And so when your photograph is taken, it doesn't just capture what we see here. Obviously there are other wavelengths of light that we can't see. Obviously, you remember the Redibrac,
Oh yes, Ready Brek.
the
Yeah.
glow in the dark Redibrac
That's right.
Redibrac
Yeah, yeah.
grid. So the and with the thermal imaging,
Insulation for kids. That's what that was the strap line, was it? Insulation for
yeah,
kids.
and with the thermal imaging camera, you'll see that, and the police obviously use it sometimes for tracking
Right.
people and
Yeah.
and
To
seeing
see
it.
if you're in the house when they're knocking on the door.
Yeah,
There's somebody in there. He hasn't paid his council tax. Come on, we'll get him.
exactly.
He's on the roof. He's on the roof.
He's on the roof. He's in the tree. He's in the bush. So so that information is effectively there, but just our eyes don't see it, and the film doesn't necessarily show it in that wavelength range as well. So, but the information is nonetheless there. And so what Peter just worked out was that if if you take the photograph of somebody when they were a baby, you can use lasers and bounce the lasers off the photograph and capture what comes back, which includes the information of the link to their DNA
Good heavens.
information.
So even if it was an ordinary black and white photo from the 1960s
Yes,
taken on just ordinary
yes,
film.
yeah,
What about digital?
doesn't matter.
Oh, doesn't matter. Wow. That's
Because
incredible.
you're effectively you're capturing the link, and it's as long as the
Right.
link is there, you've got the bridge, if you like, back to
Yes.
that information, and then you can digitize that into a sound, and then by listening to it, the body will then respond to the earlier blueprint because it's a clearer instruction of how the body should be, and actually the health or the illness that has been a result of DNA deterioration or things not healing properly or fully up to that point will start to be reversed.
Gosh, that is clever.
And they're even using it for like congenital disorders. So if for example a child was born with Down syndrome, they would use a sibling's photograph because the DNA is very close, and use their sound file, and the baby with Down syndrome would develop with considerably fewer um, manifestations of the Downs, and they can do that for
So,
any congenital disorder.
so do you think that that's possible? We're seeing an absolute huge spike in, say, things like autism at the moment.
Yeah,
And some people are associating this. Of course, it's just a theory, he says, but some people are associating it with when the kids are of a certain age, they go and see a
just
doctor,
certain
and
event.
a certain event happens, which is recommended, and all kids have this.
Yes.
And then as a result, the baby develops this problem. So it sounds like if you had a photograph pre that, which most people have a nice picture of a bouncing baby,
Yeah.
you could almost reverse that.
Certainly that has been used for that, and there have been considerable improvements in things
That's
like
amazing.
a bit of communication, much calmer, yeah, much more interactive in society. Yeah, so I mean, there have been, hesitate to say a complete 100% cure, but
Sure.
significantly improved.
And is that like a one-off treatment, or is that, do you do that ongoing, or
It's
you
sort of
listen to the
ongoing, if you like, because
right?
once you've got the sound file, the
Oh, I see. Yes, you can just keep listening to
just
it.
listen to it.
Yeah. So I mean, a mother, if a mother felt that this was working, they could just play this, before the child goes to sleep or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can actually play it during sleep.
Right.
I mean,
Even better.
Peter did a number of experiments. He did one, obviously, to prove his theories. He used rats, laboratory rats, and he gave them a toxin called aloxan, which knocks out the pancreas. So it's used by the drugs industry to test pharmaceutical drugs for diabetes. So it basically takes out the pancreas. And so he treated these rats with the aloxan, and then when the group which he was going to treat, or the group he wasn't going to treat, looked like they were starting to die because obviously without insulin and blood glucose regulation, you end up dying. And so he then started treating the treatment group, and he got a 90% recovery after 10 days
Wow.
by using the wave genetics of a healthy pancreas to effectively instruct the body to regenerate the pancreas. And he did this in Canada, and then one night he came in to discover the government had seized all his equipment. So then he
That's
went back to Moscow, and he repeated the experiment, but he divided the treatment group into three separate groups. So one was in the room with the sound, the other was in a couple of rooms down the corridor, and then there was another group 20 kilometers away, and they all healed. And they actually did histology on, so pathological analysis of the pancreas tissue, and they proved that the pancreas had effectively reformed and regenerated.
I mean, the fact that the government came in and stole the equipment, we start sort of edging towards that business about they don't want you to know this information
No.
area. But and I'm sure that's still very much the case. But it's out now, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, he was
we are in a
nominated for a Nobel Prize for medicine in in October 2020 and mysteriously died a month later.
And I suppose the pioneers of this, of which you are in the UK now, are the ones that get targeted, as you sort of said, even just by your own profession, sort of, shunning you, as it were, or shunning the
Well,
technology.
yeah, I mean,
But
that's how I got involved when I heard, because I'd known about Peter's work for quite a few years. I've sort of been following it off and on, and he produced a couple of videos a few years long, well, probably 15, 20 years ago, saying how you could reprogram DNA by speak with words. And so that was sort of the precursor to the wave genetics. So I sort of knew about his work for quite a long time. And then I heard that he had unfortunately died. And so I contacted his wife, who was also part of his research team, and sort of badgered her and said, look, this information, this technology is too good for it to be
well,
suppressed in
quite.
this way. Let me help you. So I'm literally one of a handful of people outside the Institute of Linguistics who are officially representative for them.
And I suppose now, I mean, there's no stopping it whilst it's slow, and obviously you wish it was a lot more people knew this, because you could help people, save them from pain and distress and all the other things, and not least aging, by the sounds of it. The information is out there,
Yeah,
and thanks to the internet, it's pretty difficult to stop this information. So, these powers that are desperately trying to protect the old way, which presumably they want to do it because they can make money, and or halt
yeah.
thing. I mean, presumably is there. I mean, to give the people who want to prevent this some sort of justification for one moment, is there any rogue processes that you could use the equipment for?
Um,
In the wrong hands,
well, I
can
think
it do more?
every technology has that duality, hasn't it? It has the
Yeah,
potential to be used
negatively.
for good. I mean, one of the things I know Peter was he was talking about in 2020 before he died. He was saying that he thought COVID was being spread by frequency, and taking the frequency of the the virus and using it to sort of effectively seed it. So I know he used the wave genetics sort of with a contra to that, where they had a patient who had an infection with a bacteria that were resistant to all the antibiotics, and he got the mother to send him a sample from the laboratory of a killed sample of this bacteria, and he created a wave genetics pattern for that to effectively knock it out, so that the boy made a full recovery. So you can use it for that purpose to target specific parasites or infections or whatever else to sort of to help heal. But obviously there is a potentially flip side to that. The same with any of the technologies, like I use the electric current stimulation, the scanner, and I use bioresonance for healing. But we also know the harm that 5G and the EMFs do, that
Right.
from that point of view.
And I suppose that's, I mean,
So that's
just
true
thinking
of
on.
so many different. So
Yes.
there's poisons and there's medicines. That there's
Yes.
always this duality to any technology, and it's the
So in a
responsibility of
way, I
those
mean,
using it to make sure we use it for good.
right. So I mean, in a way, a lot of people are worried about 5G radiation, and in my opinion, quite rightly.
Yes,
But
yeah.
but in theory, you could retune all those poles with electronics on it to actually put out a more healthy vibration or radiation that was actually good for you.
I mean, potentially. I mean, I
I'm not suggesting that anybody turns any of that 5G on, to be honest with you.
no, no. I
But
mean,
because if you had to turn it on, it would be better that it was putting out beneficial radiation. Because not all radiation is bad. I suppose that's what I'm trying to
yeah,
say.
no, no, exactly. I mean, I use a protection system for EMFs that actually piggybacks its own regulatory signal onto the back of the EMFs. So we know, for example, that EMFs disrupt calcium channels in the cells, and that sets off an inflammatory cascade, and you get all these sort of non-specific inflammatory symptoms all around the body, and that can result, in the wrong situation. Obviously, if it's too close to the brain, you can end up with glioblastomas and things like that. But if you've got so what this Como Systems CMO technology does is it piggybacks its own signal that stabilizes the calcium channels onto the system, onto the EMFs, so the body becomes stabilized, and the EMFs become biocompatible, for want of a better phrase. Frequency can be used to do that. And potentially, I mean, if there was if it had been if there was a genuine pandemic of something, you could get the guys at the Institute of Linguistics to effectively make a matrix that would knock out that pathogen, and they could put it on the back underneath of any broadcast going out on radio or TV for anybody listening to it.
Wow.
Which would potentially treat everybody together. But I could envisage a day in the sometime in the future when every baby gets their own radiogenetics matrix to take home, that will be their health support for the rest of their life. But it's
wow.
It's not a magic wand.
Yeah.
It won't. You've still got to have the healthy diet, the healthy lifestyle.
Yes. If you're in a road traffic accident and your elbows
it's
coming
not a magic wand that means we can sort of live debauch lives, unfortunately. And not have the consequences. So
yes.
it is a tool in the toolkit that allows us to live more healthy lives, and we use it for the animals as well. And we did one for a early teenage dog, and the owner sort of played it while she went to the shops, and came back, and she got greeted by a puppy.
Wow, that's interesting. So could it? I mean, just I'm throwing out silly ideas now,
no.
But you know how AI can produce pictures very easily, and they're very realistic these days. I mean, sometimes it's very hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
If you didn't have a photograph of, say, your dog when it was a puppy and healthy and all that, and now you've got your old dog and you go, I wish it had more health. Could you go to AI and say, look, here's half a dozen pictures of my dog prior to it, even being ill. Can you generate it looking like a puppy and then use that, or would that just not work?
I don't think that would work, because you wouldn't have the link back to that proper point on the whole.
I was hoping you would say that, because I was slightly worried that AI could suddenly have this DNA profile that we don't know about.
Yeah, but I mean, you can do other sort of general things. There are some sort of general matrices for those people who don't have a photograph. I mean, I struggled to find a photograph of me when I was a baby, because I was the second child, and so in those days, photography was expensive. You had to send your film off, and it cost money, and then it came back. So whenever there was a photo opportunity, even when I was a baby, it was a whole family affair. So you need as an individual photograph of that one person.
Does it have to be a static photo? Can it be moving like a video?
You just take a still from the video, but
even that, a fuzzy VHS.
Yeah, but the important thing is it's the person on their own, or the animal on their own, before any major health problems, obviously, and healthy and happy and all the rest of it. So that you've only got that one per individual's link back to their DNA that isn't then sort of being muddied by anybody else's, even in the background, that could be there. But they do sort of more generic ones as well. So if someone had a blood disorder, they could have, there are like the sound of healthy blood vessels and healthy blood cells. And again, you play that to the body, and the body goes, okay, this is what I'm supposed to sound like. This is how
here
I'm
is the sound of your blood gurgling through the veins.
Yeah.
Um,
So I mean, it's fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating. I mean, this is what makes, I think, this sort of stuff very interesting because, if you're open-minded to it, and it's a shame that so many people immediately bring the barriers down and just close themselves off. And as you said before, as you were before, it's all a bit woo-woo, and it's not. But until you open the doors and you start to think, actually, I wonder if there is. And having an inquiring mind is all it takes.
Yeah, and you don't have to know it to the nth degree. I mean, obviously, this technology, I think the earliest testimonial I've seen is 2011, so it's only been
Right.
sort of been used for 14 years or so. But they didn't finally work out how the really intricacies of penicillin, how that worked until 2014 either. So,
Right. So it didn't stop them
but,
using it,
but,
though,
but
did
we've
it?
still been using it since,
Yeah.
predominantly just before the Second World War. So, just because you don't fully understand something doesn't mean you can't sort of use it. You just have got to obviously be observant, tailor it accordingly, and just sort of, yeah, get back to being observant,
Mm,
which is the real basis of science.
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
you can't trust what's researched and published these days because it's so much of it is bought.
And of course, if it fails, if the evidence is, let's just say, hypothetically, there was a problem across the globe and everybody thought there was the only one medicine that they could take, and you had it put into your body by various people, and then the evidence was it wasn't as beneficial as they first thought, and people were perhaps dropping down dead. You would know to halt that.
Well, indeed, you'd think so, wouldn't you?
You would think so, wouldn't you? You would think that there would be a question mark against it, and so far people aren't, as far as you know, from the technologies you've described. Your pig hasn't sort of it was around for a lot longer
Well, I'm
till it
not
got
putting
eaten.
anything into the body that is foreign to it.
Yes,
Yes, you're stimulating the body to produce, in the case of the scanner, the endorphins and the neuropeptides, but they are what the body would normally produce anyway. So the body knows how to deal with it.
yeah,
And again, the same with the wave genetics, all you're doing is playing a sound, and the body will either listen to that sound and the instruction and have the wherewithal to do something about it, or it won't. That's basically it. The worst that will happen is nothing.
it's nothing.
Obviously, in a serious situation, that can be serious.
Well, of course, that's right.
But obviously, when
But as part of your armory of potential things,
and if
you've
there's nothing
got
else left, what
what have you got to
you've got
lose?
nothing to lose in that
Yeah.
situation. And so I've been involved with them since 2021 now, and some of the testimonials that I've had back have been really quite incredible
Do you think I'm going to have to wrap this up for
yeah,
time? But do you? I mean, we are talking of that hypothetical global issue that I just mentioned, in which people were
indeed.
offered something. There's a lot of people who now are beginning to wake up and think, "I wish I hadn't had that." Is that can the technologies that you're talking about fight some of that's been circling the bodies?
Possibly. Um, every sort of reaction, if you like, is across a spectrum. There's a spectrum of reactions. So for some individuals, yes, it might, but unfortunately, I think for some individuals, no, it won't. Um, and I don't think
But there's no harm in
there's no
trying.
harm in trying. Exactly. You've got nothing to lose by trying. The problem is once the immune system has been programmed in the wrong direction, it's very difficult to undo that. When we've obviously treating with the scanner or using the wave genetics, where it doesn't undo the immune system ability
Right.
to respond to something that we previously met. So so to a certain degree, some aspects of an immune system and how it's been trained won't be reversed. And I would say I don't think there's anything that would necessarily reverse that. So not everything is going to be reversible. I mean, but as I say, everybody's reactions has been across a spectrum. And the whole thing of a bell curve is there's a very small proportion of people for whom nothing, they really haven't got anything to help them, but there are thankfully others sort of in the main bell of the bell curve, if you like, who have got a chance to responding to other things and different things.
Well, I mean, the main thing, I suppose, is if people even if with the immune system is not working very, and if you can't cure that, the results of the thing you might be able to do something
Possibly.
about.
Yeah, possibly.
I just want to give people an optimistic ending to our interview
No,
rather
well,
than
absolutely.
But the technology in and of itself is fascinating. Where can people find out more about you and this sort of stuff? And are you available? I suppose you're in Wiltshire, I know.
Yes.
For people to get treatments if they feel they need it for both animals and indeed themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously have car can drive, so it's a bit, I see people in Wiltshire and they can come to me here, or if there's a group of animals, horses, dogs, people in another area, if there's enough people in a distant area, then that makes it viable to travel and do everybody in one go, then I'll go to that area. So it's all possible. I mean, I used to have
Yes.
international. I used to go to Italy for the day, treat some horses,
Gosh,
and come back. It was a long day, but
it's the life, isn't it?
but it's so yeah. I mean, I've got my website, which is naturalhealingsolutions.co.uk,
We'll put that
and
in the description.
and we've got wavegenetics.co.uk for people who want to find out about that one as well.
And also, you do talks, don't you?
I do. We've done a few, and yeah,
So if
always
you're
happy
an
to.
organisation who wants to have Roger come and talk about these subjects
Yeah,
and impart the knowledge, then may as well push that as well. That would be great. I've enjoyed your talks when we've been sharing the stage.
indeedy. Well, and ditto. Yes.
It's all good fun. Roger, thank you so much for coming on the show and telling us about this technology. There's so much new stuff to get our heads round and understand, but I think this is going to, this will be normal in the future.
I think so.
It's,
I think so.
it,
I
it,
think once we get to this sort of frequency paradigm area and realize actually how important biophysics is, then there's so many different ways of delivering frequency that that there's an awful lot out there, and yeah, I think it's definitely going to be the future. We've just got to sort of make it happen.
yeah. Well, thank you for being one of the people putting the idea out there and demonstrating and showing people the way forward. So there we go. That's Roger Meacock in Wiltshire. Information about him all down below in the description. Roger, really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thanks, Richard. It's always a pleasure to have a chat and meet up.
And I'm sure that we will be rubbing shoulders again on some platform somewhere. If not down at Dora's Dairy, give them a plug at the moment because John says he's got too much milk, so come and
Yeah,
get
the
it.
cows have gone out to grass.
The cows have gone out, so it's all grass fed. So go and help yourself, and that would be grand. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Roger and myself, and we'll look after yourselves. Take care, and bye for now. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks, Richard.